Good morning, all. I would like to say a very special welcome to the officials from the Ministry of Education, the Teaching Service Commission, and the Service Commissions Department, and to thank you all for taking the time to be with us here this morning. My name is Lakram Bodo. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Public Administrations and Appropriations Committee. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations has the mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, that the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, that the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this meeting this morning is to conduct an examination into the Teaching Service Commission's operations and efficiency in achieving its mandate. The role of this committee is to assist the stakeholders in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval, to determine the challenges being faced and possible solutions to these challenges, and to make recommendations for improvement of public administration. I'm also to advise that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and X @ttparliament. So, first of all, I want to ask the members of the PAC to introduce themselves, if I may start on my right.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Wade Mark, and I'm a member of the PAC.
Good morning, Sharda Patterson. I'm a member of the PAC.
Thank you, members. So if I may now invite the members of the three entities before us to introduce themselves. If I can start with the Ministry of Education.
A pleasant good morning. My name is Jacqueline Charles, and I'm Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Wilson Henderson, Jr. I'm the Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Education.
Peter Smith, Chief Education Officer, Ministry of Education.
Good morning, Suzanne Goddard, Acting Director, Secondary Section.
Good morning, Melissa Fernandez, Acting Director for Primary Department.
Thank you. If I can invite the Teaching Service Commission now.
Good morning, Mrs. Elizabeth Crouch, Chairman, Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning, Dr. Marta Devines, Member, Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning, Mrs. Vidyawati Lala Ramsamy, Member of the Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning, Chair. Mr. Inshan Mohammed, Member of the Teaching Service Commission.
Thank you. And last but not least, the Service Commissions Department.
Good morning, Corey Harrison, Director of Personal Administration, Service Commissions Department.
Good morning, Mrs. Farah Mohammed Basti, Deputy Director of Personal Administration, Service Commissions Department.
Good morning, Ms. Millie Delal, Acting Executive Director, Human Resource Management.
Good morning, my name is Sean Budan, Senior Human Resource Advisor at the Teaching Service Commission.
So thank you all very much. Welcome again for taking the time to engage in what would be a very important discussion, especially from the public's point of view. So if I may just start by inviting the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, Chairman of the Teaching Service Commission and commissioners, my colleague, Director of Personnel Administration and his staff, CEO, Deputy Permanent Secretary, and other staff of the Ministry of Education, members of the public. A pleasant good morning again. And thank you, Vice Chair, for the opportunity to address this esteemed committee and the public today as we focus on an examination into the Teaching Service Commission's operations and efficiency in achieving its mandate. It is my express privilege and responsibility to participate in this important discussion, which is critical for the well-being of our nation. The teaching profession is a very noble vocation, with teachers having the profound ability to expand, shape, and inspire young minds. Teaching is a gift, and some teachers can attest that I was born for this, to quote a famous Calypsonian. The Ministry of Education is cognizant of the important role of teachers in our society and has strived to attain its vision to nurture confident, critical thinkers by creating enabling conditions and diverse educational pathways that promote social consciousness and sustainable development. Our responsibilities span the management of all public early childhood care and education centers known as ECCE, primary, secondary, and tertiary education institutions, and oversight of all private educational institutions in Trinidad and Tobago, in conjunction with the Tobago House of Assembly's Division of Education, Research, and Technology. This has been articulated via the Education Act and achieved through various mechanisms and well-documented policies, including the Education Policy 2023 to 2027, Patriotism Policy, Digital Transformation Policy, the Cultural Transformation Policy, and Re-engaging for Success Policy, in line with our mission to provide modern, relevant, quality education for all. All this is to ensure that our young charges attain the appropriate learning outcomes, values, attitudes, and behavior. The Ministry's collaboration with the TSC remains essential as it powers to make appointments, promotions, and transfers of teachers, along with the authority to remove and exercise disciplinary measures, directly impacts the education of the nation's children, thus ensuring that we have a well-trained, highly motivated workforce for our beautiful Twin Island Republic to achieve discipline, tolerance, and production. In measure, our presence here, our qualifications, and all our achievements are in part possible because of teachers who taught us throughout our journey. The matter before us is significant, and I look forward to engaging in a constructive and transparent dialogue. This hearing presents an opportunity to examine the issues thoroughly, ensuring accountability and work collaboratively towards informed and effective policies. My team of dedicated and experienced professionals stand ready to provide clarity, insights, and any necessary information that will contribute to the deliberations. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charles. If I may now invite Mrs. Elizabeth Crouch, Chairman of the TSC, for some opening remarks.
A pleasant good morning to all. Vice Chairman, Ms. Dr. Lacron Bedo, and members of the committee, members of the listening public. We thank you for the opportunity to make brief opening comments. Our constitutional remit requires us to appoint, to transfer, to discipline, and to promote officers in the teaching service. And we welcome this opportunity to share with you and the members of the public the reality of our work. We work with severe budgetary constraints $166,000 for fiscal 2024. We are operating in 2025 with 1968 regulations. We have inherited a self-defeating practice of accepting unsolicited applications. And we have had to confront the crisis in education caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which stymied our work plans, interrupted 2 years of schooling for children and teachers, and compelled this group of commissioners to prioritize our work. The Commission, therefore, wants to tell the committee from the outset that the strategy that has allowed us to survive is prioritize, collaborate, and communicate. Together with the Ministry of Education, the Commission addressed pandemic-related learning losses by recruiting hundreds of Bachelor of Education graduates for primary schools, and this represented one giant step in the professionalization of teaching in that sector. There is no shortage of teachers in the primary sector. To treat with academic loss and the psychosocial needs of the young adolescents in the secondary sector, we recruited hundreds of heads of departments, deans, guidance officers, 21 of them, and we filled all school supervisors' positions. We actually wrote the first ever policy document for a teaching service commission, and we have prepared draft teaching regulations 2024 as opposed to 1968. And with the Ministry of Education, we have ended the practice of accepting unsolicited applications. With regard to discipline, which many people don't pay too much attention to, we are proposing a separate tribunal to deal with misconduct of teachers, in particular, sexual and physical abuse of children in the classroom and the malaise of unpunctuality and irregularity. In closing, we look forward to sharing other key aspects of our work, which somehow are never addressed. And these would include and we have spoken about these things publicly and written about these things publicly, the unacceptable and shocking gender imbalance in the teaching profession. We are also asking for the consideration of this other problem, and that is the need to address the fact that there is a 24-year waiver arranged by the CPO and tutor so that a teacher does not have to have the diploma in education and also be appointed as teacher 3. In light of the World Bank 2025 report, which makes a clear connection between the lack of teacher training and student failure, we think that this can no longer be ignored, and the Commission brings this forward as a matter of urgency. We deeply appreciate this opportunity to share the demands of this work this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Crouch. Can I now invite the Director of Personnel Administration, Mr. Harrison, to make some brief opening remarks.
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee, my esteemed colleagues and members of the Commission. Today we are gathered to undertake a crucial examination of the Teaching Service Commission operations and efficiency in achieving its constitutional mandate, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. At the conclusion of this inquiry, the Teaching Service Commission with the SCD, in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, would have demonstrated how effectively the Commission is fulfilling its mandate to support, manage, and enhance the teaching profession. However, we seek opportunities for improvement to ensure that our educators are adequately equipped to provide quality education. I hope, therefore, this examination is more than an assessment and is also about paving the way for a stronger educational framework that ultimately benefits our students and our communities. I thank you for this engagement, and we look forward for this important dialogue.
Thank you very much. So I think based on the submissions, we will have some very interesting discussions this morning. I just want to set the background that I myself have a very personal interest. I actually was a teacher myself in two capacities. One as a vacation school teacher for 2 or 3 months, and then I taught for 1 year before I went to medical school at Faizabad Senior Secondary School in those days. Faizabad Senior Comprehensive, in fact. At the tender age of 20 with a university degree. And of course realized that teaching is very challenging. So this is very personal to me as well. So I just want to set the stage for the discussion, and this is for the benefit of the public. And if I can invite the Ms. Charles from the Ministry of Education's point of view, just to give us an idea of the number of students that we're talking about in terms of and the number of schools, and of course, most importantly, the numbers of teachers. Just to have a global picture before we drill down into the details.
So there are over 13,000 teachers in both primary and secondary school.
125 secondary schools.
125 secondary schools.
And 433 primary schools.
And 433 primary schools.
433, is that?
433.
Right.
We also have 80 schools of focus. Sorry, 106 schools of focus. See you?
Yes, 106.
6 schools of focus, where we focus on the issues of indiscipline and try to provide a different level of teaching in those schools to deal with those areas of indiscipline.
Right. Just for clarity again, for my own education, you said 13,000 teachers. Can you break those down into secondary and primary? You have that breakdown?
Yes.
Chair, we can do that quickly. Ms. Goddard?
Just to help us with the discussion.
In secondary schools, we have approximately 6,700 teachers.
Primary school, Ms. Fernandez?
We have over 6,200.
Okay. All right, so Mrs. Crouch, we are talking about the Teaching Service Commission looking after about 13,000 people. So I want to thank you for that submission, which was very frank and of course sets the tone for the discussion as we go forward. And you did mention that one of your concerns would have been the severe budgetary constrictions that you are operating under. So if I may refer to the submission and the budgetary allocation here would be 255,000. So the question I want to start with is, given that the present allocation of 255,000 is insufficient to effectively and efficiently undertake the work of the Commission, what measures have been put in place to ensure that all its expenses are covered for this financial period? If I can start with that question.
That question, and I will pass it on to Mr. Harrison.
Currently, the current expenditure, as indicated, is insufficient to carry out the functions of the Teaching Service Commission. However, as I run the department as in its entirety as the Service Commission's department, I would tend to via funds from other votes in order for the Teaching Service Commission to accomplish its mandate.
Thank you. Can you perhaps indicate, so I want to put this 255,000 in perspective for the Teachers Service Commission, but I'm aware that the Service Commission's department would get an overall allocation.
Precisely.
Yeah, can you indicate what that allocation would have been in 2025? So just we can get an idea of what portion.
Approximately 84 million.
84 million.
Mm-hmm. And you'll have current expenditure, which would take majority of the budget.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so out of that 84 million, we are saying that $255,000 is the allocation for the Teaching Service
Yes.
Commission. So again, just to put it in perspective for the discussion, the other bodies would be the other service commissions.
With the
Are
other
you in a
service
position to
commissions.
give a breakdown of how that allocation would go to the other bodies?
Not at this point in time, but I can forward it to the committee.
All right, certainly. So the other question I would want to follow up with, in terms of the response to question 2, and I'm referring to the submission here from the Teaching Service Commission, Chairman. Now, it was mentioned that the decline in between fiscal 2024 and 2025, and just for the records, we are seeing a $495,000 expenditure in 2024 and now an allocation of $225,000 in 2025. And the response here is that it will negatively affect the TSC's operation in accomplishing its goals and objectives for 2025. So my question to you would be, Chairman, what specific goals and objectives will be negatively impacted by the decline in allocations? And if we can follow up in terms of what steps will be taken to mitigate the negative impacts of this shortfall.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman. The Commission needs to be able to fund panels to conduct interviews. As you are aware, because COVID-19 presented a major stumbling block, now you have a queue lined up of all areas of the service requiring interviews for appointments or promotions. In particular, the area of promotions, you hear stakeholders saying things like, well, these advertisements have been there since 2018, forgetting that COVID came along and practically stopped everything. And now we are playing catch up with the work. As I said, we have prioritized, but lined up for attention is the promotion of principals and vice principals secondary, and I think the figure is quite large. We also have to do work with senior teachers primary, and so if you are not able to field the panelists, you're not able to pay them. All of the work that we accomplished was because the Ministry of Education collaborated with us and provided the services of school supervisors and even principals and even commissioners interviewed. We got that work done because we collaborated so strongly with the ministry. But what that means is that the supervisor is no longer on the job because the supervisor is now called into 2-week interviews. So we would like to have these funds available to us so that we can service our interviews by having panels of professionals carry out these interviews. And they do it very well, and many of them wait a long time before they are paid. Many of them do it because of a service to the country. Right now, I'm sure Mr. Harrison will tell you that there are bills to pay the panelists. So the public may think that the commission is inefficient, but the reality is we do not have the money to do our work. And so we welcome this discussion to be upfront about the role of the panelists in conducting professional interviews for important positions for our 2025 goals, principals, secondary, vice principals, secondary, senior teacher, primary. They're all lined up waiting to be done. And Mr. Harrison having to, I would say, great difficulty in paying the panelists. So it's very, very straightforward how we need the money to.
I want to come back to Mr. Harrison in a moment, Chairman, but in the draft service regulations, which I took the opportunity to read, it was mentioned the creation of some sort of agency to help with the interviews. I believe you may have called it an education board or something.
Examination board.
Examination board. Can you provide some clarification on that and the thinking behind that?
The thinking behind that is that you cut down on the number of persons to be interviewed. And when we held our policy conference, Dr. Hyson Guy, who had been a previous chairman, and of course an HR specialist, indicated that the commission needs to go that route of having an examination board first tier, and then those persons who are able to pass the exam, then they go to the next level of the interview. Of course, for the very highest offices like supervisors and directors, we would have to have what is called assessment centers, and these are very sophisticated exercises. Where do you get the money from? Additionally, sir, there is also the issue of not being able to do psychometric testing, which, you know, in 2025 is not acceptable.
If I can get back to you, Mr. Harrison, in terms of the constraints that you may face. So first of all, I'm trying to understand of the allocation of the 84 million. Is there a formula? How do you decide to allocate between the commissions? How do you work that out?
Basically what happens is, based on the allocation, as I was initially stating, we have recurrent expenditure, and then we have allocation that is specific to each commission, and as I indicated, I would share that with the committee. But it's based on budget. It's based on what it is, because we would ask for certain provisions. We would indicate what these provisions are for, and it's based on the budget and through the Ministry of Finance. That is how it is we get the allocation. But there are specific votes that are allocated or assigned to each commission, which would include things like fees, other contracted services, hosting conferences and functions. Those are the votes that are specifically allocated to the Teaching Service Commission, or each commission as it is.
Just remind us which are the other commissions that you would be responsible for again?
It would be the Police Service Commission, the Public Service Commission, and the Judicial and Legal Service Commission.
Oh. Thank you. So we'll probably have to come back to the issue of funding. I just want to open up the discussion a little bit and invite the other members of the committee to carry forward the discussion. Member Mark,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being here. The various entities. Madam Chairman of the Teaching Service Commission, I certainly would like to sympathize with you and your commission as it concerns the obvious manifest challenges that your commission is faced with in addressing and in executing your constitutional mandate. I also want to say, before I get into some specifics, your commission has been wrongly, I ain't talking about WRONGLY. You have been wrongly condemned and criticized, not only by, as you define those who are doing it, stakeholders, but I dare say you have been criticized even by policymakers, to the point that policymakers have called for your abolition and extinction. So I am aghast that in 2024, 2025, you have a budget of under $200,000. I find that is a scandal of epic proportions. And I don't understand how an important body like the Teaching Service Commission is expected to function and carry out your duties under the Constitution with such limited resources. So I would like to ask some specific questions. What is the total budget that you have submitted to the relevant authorities for the Teaching Service Commission to execute its duties in an efficient, efficacious, and effective manner? What is the total budget? I know what you have been in receipt of based on what we have before us, but what is your budget? And if you could give us a breakdown of your submission, I guess you will go through the DPA, and the DPA will then go through the Minister of Finance on your behalf. So I don't know if you can speak to my question, or if the DPA will have to address that question. Could you clarify for us?
Thank you for your question, Senator Mark. That has to be addressed by the DPA.
Senator, at this point in time, we don't have the exact figures, but we could provide it to the committee. But it's in excess of $2 million we would typically request from the Budgets Division.
But if you're requesting, if, for example, Mr. It's Corey Harrison, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Could you give us, you may not be able to give us now, but you could probably give us a summary and then give us something in writing. For the last 3 years, 22 to 23, 23 to 24, 24 to 25 fiscal years. Could you tell this committee what was the total budget requested through the DPA by the Teaching Service Commission for each of those fiscal years?
I would provide the information for you. But let me...
Is it an average of 3 million?
Approximately. Yeah.
An average of, let's say approximately 3 million. And you have been, when I say you, I'm talking about the Teaching Service Commission through the DPA, would be in receipt of, for those 3 years on an annual basis, what amounts? We know for this fiscal year, you are at 155, which is peanuts, chicken feed. No commission can operate and function effectively or efficiently on $155,000. That is total scandalous. It's scandalous. So I want to get from the DPA, if you can give us that in writing or give us a summary, what was it in 2023, 2024 in terms of the allocation, actual allocation, 155 in 25. What was it in 23, 24? And what was it in 22, 23?
Certainly.
Yes.
We provide it in writing.
So, no. You must be in a position, Mr. DPA, to tell this committee and to tell Trinidad and Tobago what was your allocation
Well, we could give the allocation. The allocation tends to be 135,000 in 2023, 134,730 in 2024, and as indicated, 150 in 2025. Yeah, around 150 in 2025.
What kind of protests, what kind of submission you would have made, DPA, Mr. Corey Harrison, on behalf of the Teaching Service Commission to the Minister of Finance to deal with this woeful shortfall, I should say, in their allocation? They requested 3 million. They got 155,000. They requested 3 million on average. They get 134,000. They requested 3 million. They get 124,000. What kind of representation have we made to the Minister of Finance? And what has been the Minister of Finance's response? Because the reason why I'm asking this question is because the Teaching Service Commission has been under severe attack, assault, condemnation, criticism by policymakers. And we are being told in a submission here today, and the public is viewing this here, that all they have to work with is $155,000, and they have to deal with appointments, they have to deal with transfers, they have to deal with promotion, they have to deal with discipline, you have to pay interview panels, you have outstanding monies owed to interview panels. How can a commission function effectively when they don't have the resources? It just doesn't make sense. And that is why I'm asking you, as the DPA, what kind of representation have you made to the Minister of Finance? And even before you go to the Minister of Finance, to the Ministry of Education, because they have an oversight role in this particular area of responsibility, oversight role to some extent, in inverted commas, because as an independent body. So I'm trying to understand what representation has the DPA made and what the response has been like.
Well, first to begin, there are certain votes under the remit, under the Teaching Service Commission vote, which would include fees, which would be for legal fees. It would include other contracted services, promotion, publicity, and printing, hosting of conferences, seminars, and other functions. As it relates to representation, what it is we would look at is historical, how much legal fees we paid in the past, anticipate legal fees for the future, and make representation based on that. Other contracted services, as the chairman indicated, with respect to interviews, psychometric, we would project how many interviews we plan to have for the fiscal year, and therefore make projections based on those things as well. As it relates to hosting conferences, again, the Commission has indicated they are embarking on stakeholder engagement, engaging key stakeholders, ensuring that the work of the Commission is ventilated to the public, and therefore we would make representation based on that as well. So we have been engaging school supervision, we have been engaging the Ministry of Education through its CEO. Again, we have been engaging Tobago House of Assembly, again, making sure that the work of the Commission is represented throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, any representation we make would be budgeted and planned in order for the Commission to carry out those functions.
Madam Chairman of the Teaching Service Commission, we are here as a committee to help your commission. And it is therefore important for you to share with us as objectively and as professionally as possible what you would like a committee like us, like ours, to represent to the Parliament, the House of Representatives, to make your operations more efficient and more effective. So one of the things I want to ask you as a result of this, do you think the time has come for your commission to go full-time? And I ask this against the background of the following, which I'd like to get clarification on. How often your commission would meet or meets? When you meet, how long do you engage in those meetings? 3, what are some of the significant topics or subjects that would engage your commission? So I think it's important for us to help the commission, because I'm a strong advocate for the independence of service commissions. I'm not an abolitionist. I do not support the abolition of service commissions. And therefore, how can we make service commissions more efficient, more effective, more accountable? That is the issue that should be engaging our attention. And therefore, I'd like you to share with this committee, do you think from your deliberations at your level, and maybe from policy documents, if you have prepared any, has the commission given consideration to it being full-time, your members being full-time? Because I have a number of questions I have to deal with, but I can't monopolize all the time. I have another colleague here. I'll come back to those questions. But I just want you to share with us whether, given the workload you have, given the demands that are made upon your commission, given the fact that you are behind in meeting these obligations and other demands, whether it is something that the commission would like to consider, you want to reserve your position on, that would be your right, but whether the commission has given consideration to your operating on a full-time basis, because I cannot see you operating on a part-time basis and seeking to accomplish all of these things that you are constitutionally designed to execute according to what is your mandate. So could you share with us your thinking, or if there's any thinking at all on this whole matter of you becoming full-time, the commission becoming full-time, and at the same time tell us how often you meet, right, as a commission. And when you meet, what are the significant issues that you have to pay attention to, given the limited time that are at your disposal, and what you have to leave out? Because you made a very important statement earlier. You have to prioritize, and then you have to collaborate. I was shocked when you told us a short while ago, you have to take school supervisors who have to be carrying out duties in their various districts, to take them away from their duties to come and sit on interview panels when you could have been able to have other people do that? How is that impacting on the Ministry of Education and these school supervisors' functions and responsibilities? So we are cutting corners, literally, in order to get the Teaching Service Commission to carry out part of its mandate. That is to recruit people, to appoint people, to promote people, to transfer people. And of course, we haven't come to the real question yet, discipline. So, Madam Chair, could you share with this committee your thinking on this matter so we can be guided?
Thank you, Senator Mark. I certainly think that the chairman of the Teaching Service Commission should be full-time. I am a full-time commissioner and I have a full workday. I think it makes a huge difference when you are in the building interacting with the DPA, interacting with the executive directors, interacting with the staff. You get a good sense and a good feel of the work that has to be done. The issue of whether or not all commissioners should be full-time is something that has been discussed, but the real issue is that the staff is finite. If you look at the breakdown of the staff of the Service Commission, I think there are only 26 persons, and the rest are OJTs. So there's only a certain amount of work that could get done with that workforce. And that is why, to answer your second question, we meet every other week. But when we meet, we get a full package of what the department has been able to accomplish. And thankfully, I'm working in an environment with highly motivated people. I cannot speak more highly of the diligence, the resilience, the good thinking of DPA, the deputy, the executive. These are highly motivated people, very goal-oriented, and they have guided us to, they are working out solutions, actually. You will have seen from our submission that we have stepped up confirmations, because a confirmation is a key piece of paper. But at the end of the day, if you only have 26 staff, it doesn't really matter if all the commissioners are full-time, because you have to receive their notes, and I want to say, for every piece of business, the care that has to be taken now to get an appointment done. Any mistake that is made becomes a freedom of information request and a lawsuit. So careful work has to be done by just 26 people. The OJTs are doing their best. So definitely, to answer your first question, the chairman should be full-time. We are lucky that all the commissioners are educators. Together, we represent like about, I would say, 300 years of education between us, because we have been in education so long. And I think it's a kind of a unique situation that's happening here. I do believe commissioners in the teaching service should be educators, because we understand schools. And that is why we were moved to look after schools. It broke our hearts that children were not in school, teachers were not in school. And so we could have done other things, but we said no. Train primary school teachers. We said no, we must look at deans, we must look at heads, because we understood academic loss and the psychosocial issues. So I don't think it's the number and full-time, I think it's who you put in the commission is something to consider. Our meetings last a day, and we meet in special meetings, and we meet, commissioners will tell you, whenever I call them. They don't ever watch the clock. We meet constantly, talk constantly.
And matters are decided round robin.
And then we do a lot of round robin work when something is urgent. So I think, to answer your question, what has to happen is the staff of the Service Commission Department has to be increased. We're still with paper. We're still with paper, although we are doing our best to digitalize. And there are so many eyes, so many hands. In fact, one of the things I wanted to say this morning is you were looking at what's happening in the United States, where they're using AI applications to do recruitment, and we have to go there. I've actually explored some and said to DPA, can we possibly ever afford this? You know, where you get the scanning and the matching and all the things that would mitigate against delay. But at the end of the day, Senator Mark, a human eye has to be very careful, because if we complete interviews, as soon as the interviews are over, okay? So you got the interviews done, hundreds of people have applied for these positions, you screen and you interview, you have your scores, because we have a beautiful interview platform called the virtual interview platform, where we do it digitally. And freedom of information. They want to know why they failed. Pre-action protocol letter, holding up the placement of people. It's not easy. And I take your point about full-time, but the real issue is increasing the staff. I would feel very happy if when I demitted office, Mr. Harrison has an increased staff. So if it's one thing you want to take to the Parliament, it would be that. Make that 26, what?
About 45.
About 45. That would actually be the ideal number. And not OJTs. 45 accomplished clerks and officers in HR. Sorry.
Could you tell us, for instance, how many teachers retire on an annual basis? That's one. How many teachers are recruited through your application process on an annual basis? And the final area is, what is the timeline or gap between somebody applying and the ultimate determination that the person has been successful and he or she can begin teaching at X school, on X date? What is the time frame on average from application to ultimate fulfillment and or determination?
Okay, thank you, Senator Mark. In terms of how many retire, I think we have the figures, Can I pass that to Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Honourable Member of the Committee. We can provide an average of retiree teachers through our directors of primary and secondary, so you could get a good sense. And we're happy to also respond to the other questions you've raised. So may I please ask the directors of HR primary and secondary to give an average of retirees that we have on an annual basis.
Number interviewed in 2023, 562 for secondary schools. And for primary schools, about 1,200 were interviewed, with the net result that there are currently there were 520 successful applicants for primary schools in 2023 for denominational schools, and 420 successful. There is a pool of primary school teachers readily available for any vacancy as we speak.
Yeah, what's the time frame between application
The time
and ultimate fulfillment?
Yes.
Advertised in
2 weeks to 1 month.
Yeah.
What's the time frame?
2 weeks to 1 month.
2 weeks
to
1 month.
So if I apply to be a teacher.
Well, remember, you can't do that now, Senator Mark. There has to be an advertisement for a vacancy. Remember, that was the millstone around our neck. Everybody will walk in to the ministry and put in an application. There are currently still 4,000 backlog. So we stopped that. You said you have to now apply to a vacancy. So once that process is handled efficiently, the vacancy is identified, you get applications, then you can screen, and within a month, you can have persons who are ready on the priority list for placement in schools.
Okay. And I'll pause at this time, but Mr. Corey Harrison, have you been able to meet with, I forgot the name of the body, I think it's the Public Consulting
PMCD.
unit or something like that.
PMCD, yeah.
Yeah, PMCD, yes. Can you tell us whether, given the challenges that you have, where you only have a few 20-something staffers and a few OJTs, you talk about the magical 45 number. Have you been able to either meet with the PMCD or have somebody consult, engage somebody for consultancy purposes to determine, for instance, what are your requirements to satisfy the needs of the various service commissions so that they can carry out and execute their functions efficiently. So if you say you need to move from 24 full-time to 45 full-time, have you been able to engage PMCD to address that and have that submitted through the appropriate minister for cabinet approval so that you can engage in higher levels of efficiencies?
Senator Mack, thank you for that question. As of late 2024, August 2024, we finalized the report for the restructuring of the Service Commission, which would have enabled the facilitation of all 4 commissions to be serviced much better. That is with the Ministry of Public Admin awaiting most likely Cabinet's approval.
How long you completed that, and how long it has been with the Public Administration?
As I said, we completed the report from PMCD in August 2024.
In August of 2024?
Yes.
Okay, and then it went across?
Yes, so it's with the Ministry of Public Admin for, I think, Cabinet's approval.
Okay, any idea as to when, any feedback as to when they may take that?
No, I've been trying to get some feedback, but still awaiting some feedback from the ministry.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Member Mark. Before I invite Member Patisa to join the discussion, I just wanted to get some clarification with regards to the human resource requirements of the TSC. And if I may invite you, Chairman, and perhaps you, DPA as well, the submission, Appendix 5 of this submission has a table that speaks to it's labeled the resource efficiency of the TSC. And I'm seeing here that there are 48 employees of the TSC. Would it be correct to say that that is the actual establishment for the TSC? Perhaps you can answer that, DPA. It's Appendix 5.
Yeah, I'm seeing the establishment, but the establishment included what it is we put all the persons who would normally provide service for the Teaching Service Commission, which would include the chairman, the members.
Right. So that's 5. So
yes.
we take that 5, so that leaves us with 43 basically.
Right. And what it is we also have is a lot of clerk typists, clerk stenos, which is not core functions of the department. So what it is we're looking at as it relates to the restructuring is bolstering the core functions, which would mean HR advisors. If it is you look at the core functions, which are human resource advisors,
right,
we have limited staff in that. We have 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Well, you have, well, for HR advisor, 2, you have 5, but with 4 vacants, so there's a big vacancy there.
Yeah, but we have persons acting in those offices. But again, it's insufficient. We're talking about 13,000 teachers,
right,
carrying out the functions of the commission, which includes appointment transfers for those 13,000 teachers, as well as school supervision, as well as curriculum. For that amount of staff to service that amount of teachers, it's a bit difficult.
So the representations that you would have made to the PMCD would have been with regards to increasing the numbers
of the key
of the key personnel. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, of the key personnel, the HR advisors. We have also put on the table the introduction of technology. How it is we do things would enable the staff to do more with technology, right? So, but we need the key personnel because it's not only numbers, we need persons with the correct capacity as well. We're talking HR advisors who would have degrees, who would have specific skill sets within the HR stream as well. So it's not only about numbers as well, it's also about having the capability to carry out the functions that is required of them.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Invite member Patisa to join us.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think my question had to do with the order of priorities. What are some of the important tasks that you'll have to put aside currently?
I think, Dr. Patisa, to answer your question, we have managed the post-COVID crisis. And now we are back into, I would say, normalcy. When we have to do promotional work, it does not take away from the regular work of the department, which is to appoint, to transfer, and discipline. That always continues. Every time we meet, we have notes of appointment so that the careers of the individual teacher, so that, say, for example, we transfer a teacher or we take a teacher from being temporary to permanent, we confirm a teacher. All of that just is the regular, ordinary work, and that continues. That's never set aside. It might be slow, but it is never set aside. The problem that we faced after COVID is that certain administrative structures which steady and stabilize a school, which would have been the heads of department for curriculum, delivery and managing teachers, the deans for managing the children. We felt those middle management, we had to get that done. The supervisors, because there was so much confusion after, we made sure we fill all of those. But we haven't really set aside anything. What we are doing now is bringing forward the principals, the vice principals, the senior teachers. And very soon, we just have to do it all over again because the ministry is, of course, expanding capacity, and we have to keep doing it all over again. Our aim as educators and commissioners is to make sure we have effective schools, and that is what we have written into our policy paper. The schools must work. COVID really did a number on our school system. And once people accept that, I think the Commission is confident that working collaboratively with the Ministry of Education, with whom we share our goals, and of course with the division in Tobago, because we have a commissioner from Tobago and a work team, we can move along with the work of appointing, promoting, transferring, confirming, and of course disciplining.
One of my concerns had to do with students with special needs. Who is responsible for that? Because we currently have a problem with that in the primary and secondary schools. I know parents who have to take their children privately. How is that being addressed?
I believe that is a question for the permanent section.
Thank you. I'll hand you over to the Chief Education Officer who will provide you with that information. Dr. Smith?
Thank you very much, PS. If I may, can I supply that information in writing, please, with regard to the special needs?
Okay. Sure. Yeah. First of all, yeah, teachers, sufficient number of teachers qualified to address special needs?
At this point in time, there isn't, to be honest. Of late, what we have seen is that many of our, or not many, some of our parents are opting to send their students into our school system. Again, part of that inclusive education trust of the Ministry of Education, so that there is some catching up to be done in terms of meeting the needs of those special ed students at this point in time.
Okay, I'll wait for me for now.
Thank you, Member Patisa. Just for clarity, if I may go back to the question asked by Member Patisa and the response from Dr. Smith, Chief Education Officer. Sir? So on page 19 of this submission, there are several questions, specific questions that were asked about special needs children. And I just want to make sure that in your written submission that we actually have the answers to these specific questions. So for example, it was asked, what mechanisms are in place to facilitate the development and learning of special needs children in the primary and secondary school system? I'm not sure if you are privy to this submission from the TSC.
Yes, I am.
It's on page 19 and 20. So I'm trusting that we will have the answers. I'm just confirming that we'll have the answers to all of these questions. I don't need to repeat them for just to save time. So for example, question 2, how many special needs children are currently in the primary and secondary school system? Okay. What percentage of the teaching population has been trained to facilitate the needs of special needs children? So are we going to have the answers to all of those questions?
So, Vice Chair, if I may, at this point in time, we have approximately 4,000 students at both the primary and secondary school with special needs.
Okay.
And that information would have been captured through our needs assessment, which we administer on an annual basis. In terms of the training, annually about 300 teachers are trained, okay, and it has also become the focus of our teacher education professional development training package, whereby new teachers are exposed to methods with regards to managing students with special needs.
Great. So let me just go back to question 1 on that page then. And it speaks to the mechanisms. The question here is asking what mechanisms are in place to facilitate the development and learning of special needs children in the primary and secondary school system. Can you indicate, what is currently available? Can you shed some light on that?
Right. So certainly, Vice Chair. So through the inclusive education policy, which really guides what we do at the primary and secondary school level, we have, as was mentioned, the needs assessment, and that is administered at the commencement of the new academic year to early childhood centers, primary as well as secondary, and it's completed by our teachers. That information is then used by our student support services to plan initiatives going forward. We also have the referral process, which is used to do a little more in-depth work with students who are presenting with challenges. There are workshops as well as sensitization sessions, as was mentioned previously, and collaboration with parents and other stakeholders to ensure that our personnel, not just teachers, but our student support services, are equipped to meet and treat with some of the issues that are presented.
Dr. Smith, are you in a position to give us a breakdown in terms of the particular conditions of the special needs children? Do you have that kind of breakdown?
Vice Chair, I can supply that to you because that's something we do prepare on an annual basis.
I was thinking things like ADHD and so
Yes,
on.
yes.
But you can't give us something at this point.
Not right now, yes.
Can you perhaps provide that in writing then?
Certainly will.
And the appointment, there is a position called a teaching aide for special needs children. Can you explain the process for the appointment of the teaching aide for the special needs children?
Okay, so yes, I can. Okay, so basically the student must be referred to the Student Support Services Division by either the parent or the school. The referral information goes to the multidisciplinary team as a case for review, following which the case is assigned to the special education unit for intervention. If the child has a diagnosis, the child will be eligible for a teacher aide once available. If the child does not have a diagnosis, then he or she will be provided with alternative education strategies until diagnosis documentations are provided. That is the medical or psychoeducational assessments.
Yeah. Before I give my colleague, Member Mark, another opportunity to ask questions, I want to ask a bit about the position of deans. I mean, in my days in school, primary and secondary school, the dean was a very, very important figure. He didn't want to get to the dean's office under any circumstances. So on page 5, Chairman, I would have noted here that for 2024, 111 offices were filled with regards to the recruitment and selection process for the Office of Dean secondary schools. So I just want to link that now to the question in terms of the number of deans which must be recruited to ensure order and safety at school. So I want to start that discussion on the whole issue of discipline and safety in schools and so on. So the answer from you, Chairman, would have been that this falls under the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education. So, PS, if I can invite you at this point to whether you would be in a position, based on the current composition of secondary schools, what are the number of deans that must be recruited? We are told that 111 offices have been filled. So the question really would be, what is the gap remaining? And perhaps while you're formulating that answer, can you share with us as well whether there's a formula that is used by the Commission to determine the ratio of students to dean to ensure, of course, effective and efficient fulfillment of duties by the deans?
That's within the ministry's remit.
Sorry?
That's within the ministry's remit.
Yeah, so I'm asking, I'm directing these questions to the PS, Ministry of Education, or someone she may ask to.
And I will grantly hand them over to my Deputy Permanent Secretary who has that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. With respect, I'll take your second question first in terms of the ratio. Just to give you a background here, Cabinet Minute number 2501 of August 30, 2004 provided the rationale for establishing dean positions. And then further on, Cabinet Minute number 812 of April 11, 2001 established a ratio of deans of 1 to 200. So in terms of our deans allocated to the number of students in secondary schools, it's 1 to 200 students. Stemming from that, we do have a number of dean positions which are vacant. However, we have persons acting in the position. In terms of our vacant positions, we do have 272 dean positions vacant in the secondary school system. Of this, 272 number of dean positions vacant. However, I want to qualify that by saying that we have persons acting in the position. So whilst they may not be filled with a permanent teacher, there are persons who are performing the duties of dean and acting. Is there any other further questions?
Thank you.
So
I just want to revert back to Chairman of the TSC. Chairman, have you found any special challenges in terms of recruitment of deans? I'm thinking now that maybe the position of dean is almost a high-risk position in the current state of our secondary schools.
Yes.
So can you shed some light on that?
When we interviewed persons for deans, and commissioners were all involved, we did find that within Trinidad and Tobago, there are good teachers who want to help children. And they expressed this desire to help children very strongly during the interviews. However, the challenge remains that if the particular teacher does not get the school of his or her first preference, they are unwilling to take up positions of dean in what we call high-risk schools. And that was a source of pain for us, because as we speak, there are schools without deans, and perhaps with the possibility that they will never be deans if the person has a fear for life on limb and that sort of thing. Similarly, rural schools, I think of Blanchisseuse in particular, it's very sad. Very little enthusiasm to go there. So I think there are certain parts of the Education Act where I believe there's supposed to be an allowance for housing, and I think we have to start looking at incentives for certainly the rural schools. And I also believe for the high-risk schools, those persons should be given specialist training on how to cope. It's just not enough to pass an interview. You really have to have skills now to work with young people. I think they should be afforded specialist training. Anybody who is willing to be a dean in a high-risk school, I believe should be, to repeat, given very specialized training. And we may see some turnaround in that scenario. And then for the second area of challenge, the rural areas, I think we need to revisit maybe allowances of some kind to make it possible for those dedicated people who genuinely love children to work there.
Thank you, Chairman. Certainly, you've answered the question in terms of the incentives for rural areas. The same happens with other professionals being assigned rural areas and so on. But in terms of the special training, so is the Commission taking active steps to try to make that happen in terms of special training for the deans?
We do not train, that's not part of our remit, but we do in our quarterly newsletters point the way to a greater understanding of what is involved, and we do give tips and examples of how a person in a career like that can improve. But to be directly involved in training, we do not do that. We've had some excellent articles written in our newsletters, how to connect with young people, how to become a better dean. Whether or not people read them, we are not sure, but we do have a pool of authors who are reaching out to the teachers, and we routinely send our publications to Tutor for distribution. We send it to the Ministry of Education as well for distribution. But you have touched something that is really important to me, that nobody should be in this profession without being trained annually. Whether you are principal, vice principal, HOD, teacher, dean, training is a part of the private corporate world. You never put somebody to do a job without, providing all those supports. And I want to make a plug for going forward to make it possible for the individual to be brave enough, courageous enough, to take the risk to work with young people. That is the future, and we have to do it. Commission can't do it. We don't have the resources even to do what we have to do. But we feel very strongly, and we send a strong message about building capacity in our newsletters.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're sitting next to the PS, and I'm sure she would have heard that submission. PS, can I invite you, whether you'd want to comment on that, which I believe is an excellent suggestion from Chairman of the TSC.
Sorry, thank you, Vice Chair. In terms of the training, our recently established Teacher Education Training and Professional Development Division, which was created sometime last year, late last year, has organized and continue to organize teacher training sessions. For instance, there was a recent training last month for AIs, how to use AI, because I think the chair spoke about AI and using AI. And we certainly will take into consideration that suggestion, because there is a template right now that they are using in terms of how they are going to administer training for teacher development. Because at the ministry, we recognize that teacher training has to be ongoing and a lifelong kind of commitment. For instance, when we had to contract out primary school teachers to ensure that in September each government primary school had a teacher until the commission had developed the OML list for teachers to be promoted and appointed. That division conducted training to ensure that each teacher had the right tools and skill set to administer the training in a holistic way to ensure that there's some level of parity and consistency in the classroom. So it is something that the ministry has thought about and will continue to develop over time.
Thank you. Chairman, I just want to get back to you because I don't know if I got this wrong, but I get the impression that you were actually thinking or maybe suggesting a process akin to recertification, perhaps not every year, but over a certain period, as happens in other professions like the medical profession and the airline industry and so on. Would I be right, or would this committee be right in thinking, is that what you're suggesting?
In our interview instrument, we do have a section for two things: whether or not the candidate in front of us has gone beyond the minimum standard and has done short courses, professional development. Are they aligned with any professional associations? So we build that into our recruitment. And I guess candidates know that question is coming. And we do see now in our interviews persons who are able to say, yes, I'm a member of ASCD, or yes, I'm a member of a Caribbean professional teachers group, or yes, I just did a short course in, let's say, how to use AI or something like that. So we build that in, and we give value to it. And I think that is the way the Commission is approaching the problem, that we are telling candidates, if you want to be at the top of that order of merit list and you get the job, you have to go beyond minimum qualification. And we're getting the people, Vice Chairman, we are getting people who are remarkable. It's just that the world is changing very rapidly. And I think Trinidad and Tobago has to have the confidence that there are enough good people that if we work together, we can overcome the challenges that are faced in that Caribbean report, the World Bank report on the Caribbean, that the education system is in crisis. Now is the time for us to really give Mr. Harrison his 45 members of staff and increase, allocations where they are needed, work with the ministry as we continue to do, so that we overcome the crisis. I am not prepared to let the World Bank report diminish my determination that for every day we, the commissioners, spend in this job. We are doing our best job. We have never let the lack of funds deter us. We have found ways to get things done, not fast enough, not quick enough, but the determination is there. And we are laying the foundation for the next commission.
I thank you for that, Chairman, and the other commissioners who are here with us. Before I invite Member Mark into the discussion again, I just want to raise a few questions. As you know, this meeting is being carried live, and we have some questions from the members of the public. And one of the questions would be with regards to the OJTs, because we mentioned OJTs fill a very important role. So the questions from the public here would be, how many OJTs are part of the Service Commission? And how many transition into full-time positions? And are the OJTs being effectively utilized to take on full-time roles? I don't know, perhaps, DPA, whether you might be in a position to give some sort of answer to this. There's 3 questions from the public with regards to the OJTs. How many? And how many transition into full-time positions? And are they being effectively utilized to take on full-time roles?
Well, within the Teaching Service Commission Secretariat, we have approximately 9 OJTs, but for the entire Service Commissions Department, we have approximately 45 OJTs as part of our team. As it relates to transition, you have to recall how the Commission recruits and appoints. It recruits and appoints through advertisement, through some sort of merit-based approach, be it interviews, assessment. So therefore, only when it is OJT, probably apply for a position and get through, that's the only how they could get into the Service Commissions Department or to the wider public service. But we can't just absorb them into the Service Commissions Department. What it is I have been doing for persons who have special skill sets, because we have OJTs who come in with exceptional ICT skills, cybersecurity, AI ability, and we have been giving them short-term contracts until, we could probably, as I said, get the structure and probably encourage them to advertise when it is, encourage them to apply when we do advertise. But other than that, they have to serve their 2-year period, and then that's it.
One more question from the Commission, from the public, and I believe this would be addressed to you, Chairman. The question is this: has the Commission delegated any of its authority to principals, and does it have any plans for further delegation to principals?
No, the Commission has not delegated any function to principals. And we are alarmed if a principal were to say, for example, as we have seen, write letters saying that such and such a person has been acting in a position and the teacher believes that the principal has appointed her. So principals are not supposed to...
Other than that, I think the concept of delegation would not go to a principal. The concept of delegation would typically go to the permanent secretary.
Yeah.
So it would not go to the principal. The principal has a domain over a school. The permanent secretary has the domain over all the schools. So any consideration for delegation would have to be going to the permanent secretary.
Thank you for providing that clarification. This came from a member of the public, so I think it was important to clarify this. Member Mark, you.
I want to follow up on what the Vice Chairman was addressing earlier. Mr. Corey Harrison, the OJTs, what is the period of their contracts with the DPA? And how are they recruited? Do you go to the Ministry of Labor to have these OJTs sent to you, or do you advertise for these OJTs?
The issue of the OJTs is where we have short staff in the department, we would request from the Ministry of Labor to provide us with OJTs.
And what is the period of
And the period of
what is
2
the
years.
period of
It's 2 years.
2 years is the
Mhm.
right. And is it renewed, or do you have a heavy turnover of OJTs?
It would have a turnover. After the 2 years, the person would have to
Move on.
move on. Yeah.
Okay. How does that affect your operations? Because remember, you would have been, at least even if it's 2 years, those persons would have brought some skills to your operations, and you too, that is the DPA office, would have provided them with certain skill sets so that you could get your goals and aims achieved. How is that affecting your operations when you have this heavy turnover?
Well, it hasn't affected the operations that much because the work that the OJT provide would more or less to assist, the technical expertise in carrying out those functions. So it's more learning for the OJTs as opposed to actually doing work. The concept of the OJTs is for them to learn more than for them to do. As it relates to continuity, we ensure that there are things like desk manuals. We ensure that there's documents to follow for any new person coming on board. So it doesn't affect the operations of the Service Commissions Department that much with the OJTs.
And is there a standard flow of terms and conditions? Like, for instance, is it the Ministry of Labor?
It's the Ministry of Labor.
They would.
Yeah.
And what's the average? Is it 6,000 a month?
I think it's skewed according to qualifications.
It's skewed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks. Mr. Charles, Ministry of Education, Permanent Secretary. I think I understood, someone said a short while ago, that we have about 4,000 students who are special need or needs students in the system. Do you have a breakdown as to how many would be in the primary school system, how many would be in the secondary school system? And seeing that you have 6,700 teachers at the secondary school level, and I think some 6,200 at the primary school level, how many teachers are trained at both the primary school level and the secondary school level to deal with these 4,000 children?
Senator Mark, I'll pass you over to the Chief Executive Education Officer. He may not have all the answers, but he, I'm sure, will commit to writing the response. See you.
Sure. So if I may, in terms of the breakdown, we will have to supply you with that information. And as I said, it's not just primary and secondary, but I believe we also have that information at the early childhood level also. I would have mentioned that on an annual basis, we train approximately 300 teachers in the system. But as we roll out our teacher education programs, what we are doing now, we are building that component into that training so that that skill set exists with the average teacher as they execute their function in the classroom.
And say that you do assessments in the system, how often are these assessments conducted to determine the number of students who are afflicted with some kind of condition, developmental challenge, as the case may be?
Right. So on an annual basis, that information is collected. Basically, the first term of the academic year, a survey is sent out to ECCE, primary as well as secondary schools, and they will complete that information. And as I said, it's collated by the Student Support Services Division.
Okay. Do you have, in the United States of America, they have schools that capture these brilliant geniuses called children who have special needs. So as my colleague was saying earlier on, those who are what do you call it?
ADHD, for example.
ADHD and autism. These are children who are, I'm going to say they are brilliant. But if teachers, and the reason why this special needs matter is so critical, one gets the impression, Permanent Secretary, that the Ministry of Education does not pay sufficient attention to those children, and therefore they suffer as a result. And we are unable to capture brilliance and have them placed either in a special unit or a special class so their innovative skills can be put to work for Trinidad and Tobago. What is the Ministry of Education doing? I have heard nothing from the Ministry of Education as it relates to children, geniuses, brilliant children, but they have a development challenge, but they are bright, but they are not being harnessed. Their skills, their ability, their creativity, their innovative talents are not being tapped. How is the Ministry of Education addressing these things? Because many parents are frustrated by the kind of, sometimes teachers seem to be a bit insensitive to children who might be misbehaving, but they might say it's misbehavior. But it's not misbehavior. It is a symptom that if you don't understand, if you are not trained, if you are not educated, you will miss a child who may appear to be misbehaving, but he's not really misbehaving. It's a symptom of a development channel or challenge. So I just want to ask Mrs. Charles again, what are we doing? Does the ministry have any program, any real thrust to capture the brilliance and that genius that we have in these kids? But they have, as I said, developmental challenges. How are we treating those people? Sure.
Thank you, Senator Mark. As the CEO indicated, that there's a mechanism to capture those children through the principals in schools, and the recently created unit that I spoke about, the Teacher Training Development Unit, he also spoke about them teaching teachers how to treat with those children. Yes, it's an issue across the board, and I think it's something that now society understands better than before, because as you said previously, those children were only thought as miserable children, not understanding they are in fact geniuses. So I could ask the CEO to explain a little more in terms of what programs or measures beyond those that I have indicated. In addition, the ministry has student aides, or yes, we call them student aides now. These are persons who sometimes are OJT from the Ministry of Labor, who are assigned to children who have these special needs to help them in the classroom. So they are not set aside outside of the classroom. There are people working in the classroom to help them cope with their nuances. So CEO, is there anything extra you want to?
Perhaps I can. Thank you very much, PS. The individualized education plans. These plans are specifically developed to meet the needs of children with special educational needs, so that there is some adaptation going forward. If you want to think of the Teaching Act, we are looking at learning outcomes, we are looking at assessment, and then we are looking at the teaching. And rightly said, some of those methods may not be appropriate for our special education needs students. So we need to make that modification to the learning outcomes. So instead of giving them to achieve a certain objective, we may decide to break down that objective into smaller chunks so that it's more manageable for our students. In terms of the learning outcomes, what we may want to do also, may want to utilize a lot more concrete materials, because we recognize that they do learn differently in some instances. And then in terms of the assessment, you may be familiar with SCA as well as CSEC and CAPE, and there is the special concession that we offer to those students who have those challenges. But as mentioned, it is a work in progress going forward. And what we are seeing, whereas previously some of our parents were reluctant to allow their children with special needs to enter our early childhood centers, we are seeing parents now making that move to enroll their students or their children. So the work definitely does continue.
So are there special programs or degrees that the ministry would encourage teachers who would like to teach in the secondary or primary school level targeting these children? Is there a special kind of program that you all have designed or you all have developed in conjunction with the university or specialists attached to the university, so that these people who are teachers can be trained to capture these people and then, as I said, harness their skills, so that, for instance, what you are saying, it doesn't appear as we speak we can talk to the issue of a special unit within each school in Trinidad and Tobago, or let's say a limited number of schools in a particular region that have these specialist teachers capturing and harnessing these kids, right? And at the end of each year, or the end of their period of training and learning in the school system, we can say, well, look, Trinidad and Tobago in the Central Division, in the Southern Division, in the Tobago region, in the Northern region, as the case may be, have in fact graduated 100 children, special needs. And you know what? They have become excellent X or Y in robotics. They have become A-class student in some other scientific field. And we are able to boast in Trinidad and Tobago that, look, the Ministry of Education over a period of time has been able to capture and to really display to the entire public what they have been able to harness. Is there anything in mind, CEO, as it relates to how we are going to deal with that?
Right.
Because I'm not getting that from your submission, and I don't know if it's part, Madam Permanent Secretary, of the strategic vision and strategic plan of the Ministry of Education down the road 5 years from now. So I'm just trying to ask you if you have something to treat with those kids over, the medium and long term.
So not specifically for special education needs children, because although sometimes they may be brilliant in one area, it's also important to understand that we really want well-rounded students.
Right.
So the academic is key. We also want to ensure that the behavioral aspects are there, the attitudes are also there. And so through our cultural transformation policy, which has been published on the Ministry of Education website, you can see the suite of things we want to expose all our children to. So it includes sports, it includes the academic, It includes the appreciation for other cultures, other languages. So it's not just simply about our special education needs students. It's about students in general leaving our education system. But as was mentioned, there is the need for us to do some adaptation, some accommodation, some modification with regards to our special education needs students. And just to probably state, this year we would have introduced the online application for first-year enrollment. What that allows us to do going forward now is that we actually have a database that we can use to successfully track our students once they enter our primary school system.
Okay. We'll come back to that, but it's a recommendation I think that is worthy of consideration as we go into the future. Let me just go to another area. In terms of IT, ICT, the digital revolution, tell me, Madam Charles, Permanent Secretary, I know we are still paper-driven. We are still a manually driven society, especially within the public service. I know efforts are being made, by the way, to bring about a technological revolution in how we do business. I raise this against the background of efficiency and the Teaching Service Commission. When you get documents from teachers, those documents would be placed in the Ministry of Education, in a file, whatever. And if a request comes in from the Teaching Service Commission, let's say pension, for example, have we been able to really use IT to transform this manually driven system so that if the Teaching Service Commission wants to have access to files, rather than they getting paper files, they can get electronic files? To what extent that has taken place to bring about greater efficiencies at the level of the ministry as they link up with the Teaching Service Commission, as example, and even the DPA, because the DPA and so on is the repository of so many files. I don't know to what extent maybe the TPP could tell us how that revolution is going and what percentage of this paper filing system has been gotten rid of and replaced by electronic means and so on. So maybe, Madam Charles, you can probably give us some guidance here on that IT function.
Thank you, Senator Mark. Actually, you have hit a hammer on a well-rounded nail. The Ministry of Public Administration is currently doing exactly what you just described. There is a digitization program under that ministry that is designed specifically to deal with that, which is to digitize all the files. The Ministry of Education is one of those agencies, given its vastness and 13,000 teachers. Currently, approximately 2,000 files from primary, I think, have been digitized. So we understand what is required, and we are on the path towards achieving that end. I might also add that, as CEO just described, we are using technology for the enrollment of first-year students. The ministry also has a digital program for persons or teachers who want to get their job letters. So no longer you have to wait 100 years or until the clerk decide that they're going to come out to work or attend to your matter. You can go on the website and in a click of a button, you have a job letter. Other things have been going on. We have a digitized system for principals to indicate the critical repair programs that are necessary for school, and also CEO have other projects and programs that is under his division that are currently on par with what is happening in the international community. So the ministry has and will continue in the terms of using technology to move the process more smoothly along. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Corey Harrison, what about the DPA, Service Commission?
Yes, the Service Commission Department has been embarking on a digital transformation of the entire department. Currently, within the Teaching Service Commission Secretariat, we have scanned approximately about 95% of our files. We have scanned all the minutes, all the decisions of the commissions. We have been scanning as well the assessment for interviews. So a lot of our information are currently stored in a digital form. We have a PSIP project which would include an EDRMS, which would mean a document management system for the entire department. It would allow us to be much more predictive in how it is we carry out functions, how the Commission would be able to carry out functions, because now we would be using data analytics for the Commission to make decisions. We are in the second year of that transformation, so a lot of scanning is still going on. A lot of back-end work is also going on. We have also included a virtual interview platform, as the chairman indicated before, where we do interviews virtually and the scores are tabulated online. So there's limited errors in when it is we carrying out those functions. We have implemented a recruitment where we take applications online. We have been in discussions with the Ministry of Public Admin to further that, where we would take applications online again in order to speed up the process and to make the functions of the Commission much more efficient. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear that that is a project that is on its way. Any idea as to when there's a possible completion time frame, Madam Charles and Mr. Corey Harrison? Any time frame for completion?
For the department, we estimate for the entire department for the rollout, which will also include engaging with the ministries and department, because what it is we are looking at is every piece of correspondence that is coming from the ministry and department would come as a soft copy to start off with. So we'll have the ability to move that piece of correspondence through the department with a digital form. We anticipate that to be completed for the entire department, because really we're dealing with 4 commissions in about the next 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. The other area I wanted to clarify has to do with discipline. Madam Chair of the Teaching Service Commission, your mandate is discipline. One of your functions or duties, I should say. Could you tell this committee how many teachers at the primary school level, early adult education level? By the way, the early adult education level, the teachers are recruited through the Teaching Service Commission.
Early childhood? No.
Yes.
No.
Well, they are on their own? How is that done? How are teachers provided for the early education of these kids? Who pays for the teachers? Is that the government?
Yes. Senator
Who
Mark,
recruits?
it's the
Who recruits them?
Ministry of Education via contract.
You're on contract still?
Sorry, the ECC teachers are contract workers.
On contract. Why are they on contract, and what steps are being made to make them permanent, like teachers in the primary school level and the secondary school level?
I will pass that on to you, but just take into consideration that when these schools were developed, the easiest route was to have contract workers, because it's easier to add on and get a decision instantaneously, because as you would realize that these schools were developed over a period of time. So they might have started with 10 or 20 schools, now it's about 50-something schools throughout the country. if you need further explanation in terms of, no decision has been made as yet in terms of moving them into the public service establishment. And that is something certainly to consider as the ministry realigns its strategic plan to deal with some of the issues you raised and this one that you're currently raising. Thank you.
How many teachers are we talking about? 2,000, 3,000, 1,000. How many?
We can provide that in writing. You may not have the information at hand because, as I said, it's a contract, which means sometimes you have to go back and renew. So in terms of the total number, we do not have that.
What's the period of the contract?
3-year contracts.
And how long the experiment has been going on? This work in progress.
So the experiment?
No, it's an experiment you're talking about because you say that we had 20 schools started, then we now gone to 56. So it's a work in progress. So you might go to 100 just now. So I'm just asking, how long has that been going on? Has that been going on for the last 10 to 15 years? Because I'm just trying to understand the period of time this thing has been going on.
So, Senator Mark, I think in its original conception, ECC wasn't included as part of our Education Act. So steps are afoot at this point in time to ensure that they do form part of the Education Act going forward.
Okay. Any time frame for that?
I can't state conclusively at this point in time. The ministry would have done its part and it would have forwarded its recommendations.
Okay. And that would have been when?
So I can't get that information to you from our legal department.
That is an area that we have to pay attention to. And we would like to at least have some submission from the Ministry of Education on that, because, you know, contract labor, I have always deemed it as a form of slave labor. I don't appreciate that citizens who are given service should be continuously be recruited, a 2-year contract, then fired, gratuity, come back on board. I find that is totally unacceptable, but it's something that we'll come back to at the appropriate time. I just wanted to ask also, how many teachers are on suspension as we speak on disciplinary charges? And could you give us a breakdown of the disciplinary charges that these teachers are on, both at the primary school level, at the early childhood education level, as well as the level of secondary school? Give us a breakdown.
Senator, there's a lot of things that we need to put together for us to give you that final number. So could we make that as a submission to the committee?
Well, we can't get an average, because I think we have a wealth of knowledge before us here. And we must be able to...
You see, we have matters where it is persons would have been, due to the High Court, let's say a criminal matter. We have matters where it's things like habitual lateness. Then there's things like corporal punishment, there's misconduct, sexual misconduct. So for us to give you the number specifically, I think let us take some time before we don't give you incorrect numbers, okay?
So
the number, excuse me, we had 118 cases of misconduct in 2023, and we have 101 so far for 2024. Now, in cases where it is punctuality and irregularity, we do not suspend.
Right.
Because you're already not coming to school, we're not sending you home. Where an officer is suspended, so if you look at our data, it would be with regard to any sexual misconduct. Immediately, cease to report.
Right.
Or physical abuse of children. So wherever in our data you see that somebody is before a tribunal for physical abuse, sexual abuse of a child, they would be on suspension.
Right.
But if it's irregularity and punctuality, it would be noted as misconduct. They would be before a tribunal, but they are not suspended.
Right.
So the figures that we have is we have 118 people with various charges in 2023 and 101 in 2024.
Right. Are they suspended, madam, at full pay?
What's
on
that?
full pay?
They are suspended on full pay.
On full pay. And people on punctuality and irregularity?
They're left in school,
Right.
and the penalty that is applied is usually a fine.
A fine.
Which, of course, they still can have representations for.
Right.
Some persons find fines burdensome, and the commission looks at whether or not the person has 6 children and really cannot afford to be fined. So that is the way it goes. Mercifully, we do not have, we do have instances of sexual misconduct. I would say an average of about 10 to 12 every year. Physical abuse, beating children, same amount. The big issues with discipline is really unpunctuality and irregularity.
Okay.
And you have officers with as many as 11 and 12,000 minutes late for the year.
Okay. Now, your tribunals, the members of those tribunals to hear these matters of, let's say, irregularity and punctuality, are they recruited and paid by the Teaching Service Commission or by the DPA on behalf of the teaching, or do they do that voluntarily?
No, they are contracted. I don't think nobody would do that bulk of work voluntarily. But they are contracted with the DPA on behalf of not only the Teaching Service Commission, but the Public Service Commission as well. And they carry out the functions of a tribunal. And then they have to provide a report for the commission to consider and determine whether or not that person is guilty or not guilty.
And do you find that, Madam Chair and Mr. DPA Mr. Corey Harrison, the level of efficiency in addressing these matters, do they leave a lot to be desired? Do you think that, for instance, we need to pay attention to that a little more in terms of from the moment it is committed to the point when you take a final decision, if the person guilty, not guilty, as the case may be? What's the timeline? What's the time frame? What's the period?
For cases of irregularity and punctuality, the investigating officer is usually a school supervisor. They have their own work to do, and they're given a certain period of time in which to complete the investigation. Once all that data comes in, that the allegation that you were 12,000 minutes late, then it is brought to the commission to move forward with the matter. Then it is assigned to a tribunal. But the tribunal is dealing with all the issues in the public service and, so it takes a while. It does take a while. What also extends the period of time is if the officer does not plead guilty and hires an attorney, then the matter is dragged out. But our particular concern is what is happening to our children, because when these delays happen, sometimes the child may have left the primary school or have left the secondary school. Parents are unwilling to have their children, the victims, further testify. It's too traumatic. So it is a matter of concern, which is why we have approached DPA to find the funding for tribunals specifically for teaching, because children are being affected. We hardly ever, I mean, you don't have situations where a teacher and another teacher are fighting, although you could have a breakdown in discipline in a school. What we really are looking at would be corporal punishment, sexual grooming, sexual assault, and the irregularity and unpunctuality. And really, it is really not acceptable to have those matters delayed. The teacher who is late continues to be late because the thing might take 2 years or more. And what is happening in the meantime? But more important for us, the child who has been affected may very well have to leave school with that matter unresolved. We recently had a case of a young man who was very brave and admitted that he had been assaulted. He gave the testimony. The commission found him, the tribunal felt the charge had been proven. The commission dismissed him. It was brought to the attention of the Public Service Appeal Court by the teacher. He wanted his matter to be heard again, and the Public Service Appeal Board upheld the commission's decision to dismiss him.
Okay.
The teacher then took it to the court. You see, and the court is now questioning the evidence that the boy gave. So this commission has a particular concern about our ability to protect children, either from corporal punishment, licks, or sexual grooming and sexual assault. And we do take your point that those matters need to be moved along efficiently, and we are hoping that with the new regulation, some of these matters can be addressed.
Do you think, Madam Chair, the time has come to link the DPA, and you should have your own secretariat, and let the DPA just focus on the public service? You must have your own tribunal. The question here is that this is a serious matter, and you have made the case, as far as I'm concerned, how this delay, and it's not the fault of the DPA. The DPA is operating, obviously, within certain financial constraints, because I'm sure the DPA, the ideal approach to this matter is for each service commission to have its own independent tribunal recruited and be sitting there full time to hear matters whenever these matters come up, and they be given a stipend, as the case may be, rather than to have 1 or 1.5 tribunals set up for all the 4 service commissions. That don't make sense. So I think that it is something that we at this level have to give consideration to.
No, we have 5 tribunals.
You have 5 tribunals. But I was just referring to what the distinguished chairman said.
No, but we have matters that deal with prisons, fire, and the civil service, as well as the teaching service commission. So what the chair is advocating is for a tribunal dedicated to teaching service commission matters solely.
Yes, and I'm supporting that. I'm saying.
But the other issue of delay, and the chair did not mention it, is that the tribunals, well, first to begin, persons are now being represented by attorneys.
Right.
The tribunal is deemed a sort of a lower court. So persons who have to represent the person the person who is representing the accused is putting their efforts and their time into the higher courts.
Right.
So we have delays and we have a lot of postponement at the tribunal level. So the case management itself has become an issue because of that representation by attorneys, because they would have to go to the High Court, they would have to go to the Court of Appeal. So all other court matters takes precedent over the tribunals. So therefore lies the delay as well.
So what's the average time, Mr. DPA, you would say these things take, like from, as I say, inception to conclusion? It could be averaging between what, a year, 2 years before tribunal?
A year to 2 years, yeah, precisely.
Yeah. I mean, and as the chairman said, by that time a child who might have been sexually abused, physically handled or mishandled would have left school and is not prepared to come and testify. What happens to the individual who has done that to that child? Does he go free because the child is not willing to come back and testify? He has left the system. So I'm saying that I agree with the chairman that if we are thinking about the children, what impact psychologically and otherwise, emotionally, that would have on our child's future. So it does require some rethinking on the part of the DPA, because you seem to be the treasure chest for everything. You are the man with all the money, $84 million, right? And you dish out money to the Teaching Service Commission, Public Service Commission, Police Service Commission. So I think that it is something that ought to be given serious consideration. You see, remember, this hearing today, this inquiry today, is dealing with improving the efficiency of the Teaching Service Commission in the execution of its operations. And if discipline is an issue, we have to determine how best we can put measures in place to address discipline where you have fairness. The scales of justice must be evenly balanced. I have no problem. I'm a former trade unionist. So I have no problem with the scales of justice being properly balanced. But at the same time, you want efficiency. And I'm just arguing or advancing my point, Mr. Harrison, we need to probably give this thing some consideration. And that is why it is always important at these inquiries to get from you, Mr. Corey Harrison, and the chairman, and the permanent secretary, Mrs. Jacqueline Charles, as the case may be, what are your submissions? What are your objective submissions? What recommendations you would like this committee to consider, so that when we come forward with our findings and our recommendations, it will be in the interest of the Teaching Service Commission, the Ministry of Education, and the DPA. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pause.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Member Mark. Before I invite Member Patisa to raise some questions again, I just want to take us back to questions being asked by the public. And this inquiry obviously is generating a lot of public attention. And again, in terms of the special needs children. So PS, first of all, I just want this, I want confirmation, because it is, member of the public is indicating that for the special needs children, that the training is just 1 day, once per academic year. Can you confirm whether that is correct? For those who are tasked with looking after the special needs children, is it true then that the training is 1 day per academic year?
Vice Chair, our current trust is for training to be ongoing, so that at the commencement of every term of the academic year, a very detailed schedule is presented, which allows principals as well as teachers to register for courses. So it is going to be ongoing and not necessarily a one-off going forward. Okay, so it will not be correct to say that it's just 1 day per academic year. I just wanted to clarify that for the benefit of the public. The second question relates to the...
Mr. CEO, I think what the chairman is asking, Vice Chair, given what the public is asking, as we speak, do we have, for instance, like in any 1 year, the training is conducted on 1 day, only 1 day per year? Yes, it is continuing the following year for another day, and then the next year for another day. I think what he's asking is the public is asking, as far as they are concerned, the training is inadequate, and they are submitting, according to them, it is only conducted 1 day in the academic year. So every academic year, training is 1 day. So I think that is what he is trying to get clarified. I myself want to get clarification. And the person who has asked that question in the public space would like to get a proper answer. So could you clarify for the public and for us whether it is 1 day in each academic year, and then it continues next year, 1 day in the academic year? I'm not too sure. I'm just trying to get clarification.
Thank you, Member Mark. I believe that is the answer we're looking for.
Okay, so through our Teacher Professional Development Unit, as indicated, which has recently come on board, training with regards to dealing with students with special education needs will be an ongoing. There are going to be instances where sometimes we may have one particular day, but that is not going to be the end of it. The training will continue, as I indicated.
So just for the benefit of the public, you're saying to us, CEO, that it is not 1 day per academic year?
No, it's not.
So you're saying that these people will be trained on more than one occasion per academic year?
Yes, I'm saying that, Vice
So the
Chair.
public is to understand that?
Yes, and just to give some clarity again, as I mentioned before, we have new teachers coming on board. And so as part of that training, as I said before, they will be exposed to methodologies for treating with students with special needs.
All right, we'll take it there. The other question relates to, again, the teacher aid for special needs children. And the question being asked is, can a parent or can parents apply and be trained to be the aid for their child? And this is coming from a member of the public who has an autistic child, and just to give you an example. So the question is, is it possible for parents to apply and be the aid, to be trained as the aid for their child? And I can understand and see why this might be something that a parent may want to do.
Mr. Vice Chair, is this applied to have a job or applied to be able to assist the child specifically?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think the answer to both would be useful here, PS.
Okay.
Because, Vice Chair, I know there is that collaboration between student support services as well as parents. So that is possible. As Pierre sort of mentioned, I don't know if the person is thinking of it in terms of being physically in the classroom, but certainly the Ministry of Education, through its student support services, do collaborate with parents in assisting them to deal with their charges who may have special education needs.
So you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, I think the question here is whether the parent will be allowed in the classroom. Is there concern with that?
That is something I think we will have to give consideration, well, not give further thought to, because there are issues. Sometimes persons can overstep, so we would need to have additional discussion on that matter in terms of having parents be present in the classrooms.
P.S., what are your thoughts?
I agree with my CEO, because what you don't want to have is a parent perhaps in a classroom thinking this is my child and you want the best for your child, as all parents do, and the teachers having a discourse with the other students, and it becomes a little problematic. So it really has to be looked at in a longitudinal way. And of course, you have to address the parents' ability to understand their remit when they are in the classroom, and the teacher is the persons with the, I wouldn't say power, but the authority figure for discharging the responsibility of teaching the child.
Thank you. P.S. This issue of the training does not seem to want to go away so quickly from the public. So I have the question in front of me again, CEO. How many days does the training session consist of? I think this member of the public just wants to be absolutely clear.
Okay, so if I may, Vice Chair, allow me to get the actual information so I can supply that in writing.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just wanted to touch on one other area, and this relates to the issue of the recruitment for the primary, Chairman, for the primary schools. And you in your introductory submission, you mentioned about the Teaching Service Commission moving away in terms of how recruitment is done and not accepting unsolicited applications anymore. But I note here that I'm referring here to page 23, 24, and 25 thereabouts in the submission. And I'm seeing here that for 2023, from your annual report, that there were 520 successful candidates out of 631 persons interviewed. But at the time of the response, that only 102 of these 520 candidates were placed in the primary schools. Can you shed some light on that?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Now, the information in the public domain is that there are vacancies in primary schools and that there are no teachers, rather, to fill these vacancies. The facts are that together with the Ministry of Education, the Teaching Service Commission recruited 520 persons from more than 1,000 persons who applied for the office of Teacher 1 in denominational schools in 2023. I just want to clarify that a Teacher 1 is a trained teacher who can step into the classroom fully prepared to teach. I think the last time that happened in Trinidad and Tobago was when we had the Mausica Teachers Training College, when I think it's about 16 years, we produced wonderful primary school teachers, went into the classroom, they were ready to teach. They weren't learning to teach while they were in the classroom. Now, so throughout 2023 and 2024, 228 vacancies were filled in the denominational schools. And that means that 228 teachers were appointed. And currently, from that 520, we do the arithmetic, there is now a pool of 292 teachers on a priority list that a board can make a recommendation from. So that means that 93 people can be employed if these persons are recommended. On the government side, 420 were recruited and 126 teachers were appointed. There is now 294 trained teachers on a priority list so that any vacancy that arises in a government school, maternity, sick leave, whatever, the ministry can fill those vacancies because of this pool of professional body of teachers. So that together, we add all the numbers together. I'm happy we're able to have some numbers. Between 2023 and 2024, 354 primary school teachers were placed in the primary school system. There is no shortage of available primary school teachers.
I think that clarification is important. Another question here from the public, Chairman, with regards to the decision by the Commission to no longer interview or accept unsolicited applications. The question is, could the TSC indicate how does this requirement to apply in response to an advertisement of a vacancy line up with the Concordat? And maybe before you answer that question, one of the responses here I see was that there was a legal challenge from two of the denominational boards. So I don't know whether you might want to give us an update on that. The newspaper reports are indicating that the court has taken a decision with regards to that matter. So I don't know whether you might want to link both of them together.
Okay, so the advertisement is open to the public. In keeping with the regulations, the teacher one position was advertised to the whole public. Okay? Everyone of any faith was free to apply. All of those applications, all were sent to boards for them to make their recommendation. Thereafter, those recommendations were sent to the Ministry of Education, that had them, sent to the DPA, and then we screened, because obviously of the 1,200, everybody didn't qualify. 520 persons were successful. They had their qualification, and they even had their, what was it, police certificate, Miss? Certificate of, they had to have their certificate of good character from the police. Thereafter, that list indicating persons who had self-identified as being of a particular religious persuasion, that entire list was sent to the boards. The boards were then free to select from that list. And boards did select from that list, and 228 persons from various faiths were placed. But you have to find people of your faith on the list. Okay? So in terms of the Concordat is upheld because neither the Ministry of Education nor the Teaching Service Commission will appoint anyone without the recommendation of the board. So the Concordat was upheld. What was different is that this was an open application process, as opposed to boards bringing in pre-selected persons for the commission to interview. So this was no pre-selection. This was an open public advertisement, which meant that because our philosophy tells us we have to operate from a position of constitutionality and fairness and so on. But never was it taken away that a board would be unable to make a recommendation. So that if a board does not make a recommendation, then they have a vacancy.
So, Chairman, you were saying that...
Vice Chair, I think we had to be careful with this because, the judgment was made at the High Court, and we are not certain if it is the matter would be appealed. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, in those circumstances, I will leave that there. But I just wanted to, in your submission again, Chairman, you mentioned something about the 24-year waiver, and you spoke to no need for diploma in education. Do you want to expand on that? Because I got the impression that you were making a plug to this committee to find a way to try to get that dealt with.
Yes. So what is happening here is that there's a memorandum of understanding between the Chief Personnel Officer and tutor, whereby the DPED requirement be appointed as has been waived. So that the Commission is being asked to appoint persons without the DPED. The thinking behind that apparently was out of the lack of sufficient teacher training capacity at the University of the West Indies. But 24 years have passed. And I think an audit should be done to find out how many untrained teachers reside in the secondary school system. Since we now have a report from the World Bank stating that there's a crisis in education, and it is directly linked to the lack of trained teachers.
Thank you. You also, Chairman, indicated that there was a concern about the gender imbalance. Would you care to clarify?
The figures are shocking. Shall I share them with you?
Yeah, of course, and the public.
We interviewed, say for example, deans. 83 were women and 36 were men. So that just gives you an idea. In terms generally of what is going on with men and women in the profession, I'm just looking to see if I can find it right here now. Did you take up my... We recruited at the primary level. So that's a fresh batch, right? 13 men were placed in the nominational schools, 215 women were placed. In the government schools, teacher 1, fresh batch, now going in, 9 men, 115 women. And this is the pattern right through in terms of what's going on in education. We had some statistics from the annual digest, and we published it in our newsletter. Primary school teachers, 82% are female, and 18% are male. Secondary school teachers, 72% are female, and 38% are male. That is what is going on. So that going forward, there'll be fewer and fewer men in education.
I want to ask a question, but I'm not sure whether I should ask that question. That has been the trend. So the Commission is concerned, obviously. Are there any steps being taken? Are you saying that that imbalance should be addressed then? Is that your concern?
It's a source of concern to the Commission because I think there are boys' schools, and boys' schools, I would think, require at some level a contingent of male role models. It becomes a serious problem where the principal of the boys' school is a woman. And that's where we're going because of this imbalance. The Commission is appointing and promoting, I gave you the figure with the dean, more and more women as opposed to men. The thinking is that the career is not one where a man can make a living, but I know that there were male teachers in the past and male principals, and people had very good lifestyles, but maybe it's not possible now. We are just bringing attention.
No, and I appreciate that, Chairman. I think it's an important statistic, and it throws out something in the public domain, for us to think about. I just want to move on quickly to the issue with the recruitment process for secondary school teachers. And I see that there has been a challenge in some areas. For example, the technical vocational area, woodworking, metalwork, welding, and so on. Has the Commission taken any steps to try to create public awareness as to which areas are in short supply, or would that be the role of the Ministry of Education?
I believe that is the role of the Ministry.
Yeah. PS, can you shed some light on what is happening here with regards to the shortages in certain areas for secondary school teachers?
Have that data and the DPS will read it out for you. But it is a serious challenge, and what the ministry has done previously in other years that we have contract out some of those positions, but still the issue of persons being able to satisfy, to actually teach the skill. You might be an excellent mechanic, but can you teach mechanic to a young charge? So the issue is wide and varied, and as Chair said, the teaching profession, I like the term, it is no longer seen as sexy, one that persons are encouraged, especially male, are encouraged to go into, because the private sector pays well, and it's probably more exciting to do work in the private sector versus the public sector, which doesn't pay as well.
But we have a responsibility to teach students. And I go back to my first job as a teacher in the brand new Faizabad Senior Comprehensive School, where there was an entire section devoted to tech work, and they were the technical vocational teachers who came from the background, mechanics and woodworking and so on. So we've gone a long way from that. But does the ministry have any plan to try to address this in terms of public education, public awareness, and so on? And again, the issue, Chairman, with regards to incentivizing some of those areas, surely we have to think outside of the box to address an issue like this.
The incentivizing, Chair, Vice Chair, sorry, is through the CPO in terms of the public service. It is via contract that we could probably pay a little more above what the public service pays, and that is why we have sort of going that route of going contract to alleviate. But still, we have the issue that persons are not coming on board for some of these skills. We can give you the data. It's alarming. I visited a school, and the block that deals with tech work area was closed. Nothing is happening, machinery rusted away. And you know, in some of these schools that we call schools of focus, where children may not have the academic pursuit and drive, that's an area we try to funnel persons to do those things, because the society, a plumber probably works for more money than me. When he comes to fix my plumbing, it costs me some good money. So, you know, I think we as a society need to reevaluate what a job is in terms of our ability to go in that, because everyone might not be a doctor, lawyer, nurse, or teacher, but there are other professions that pays well that society looks down at, but it can provide that income for persons. So the data, sir.
Again, question from the public here. A lot of public interest in this meeting, apparently. So the question has been asked, what is the salary range currently for? So would it be all secondary school teachers would be in the same salary range? For the tech work, sorry, for the tech work teachers.
I will allow the Director of HR to respond. Secondary.
My apologies, I don't have that figure on hand. Since the new salary negotiation.
The previous figures, are you able to share that?
It was a TVT1 grade 2, the average was 6,700.
Per month?
Around there, yeah.
Per month. Thank
Right,
you.
and the former salary was for TVT2, 9,100.
Yeah. All right, so I will invite Member Patisa to ask a few more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'm going to go back to the issue of the special needs for a bit, because it's another question from the public as well. How long does it take to be allocated aid?
it may depend on the availability of aids. So to give you a conclusive answer in terms of days or weeks, it's difficult to do so at this point in time because of the great demand for aids.
Okay, and that brings me to another question that I had about student support services, because parents have spoken, I've spoken to parents on this. And one of the issues that they have is that when they apply to student support services for help, they are told that it's dependent on the salary of the parents. So if your salary is in a certain range, you're not eligible for that aid. Can you clarify that?
Unfortunately, I'm unable to because, again, this is the first time I'm hearing of something like that.
Okay. Do you know what the process is like? Access to apply?
To get an aid? I would have indicated the process. So normally it starts off sometimes with the teachers making a recommendation, and then it's taken over to the MDT, the special ed unit, and again, the diagnosis that takes place. And once there's the availability, then that support is provided. So we do have a written submission, I believe, with that process.
Okay. The second question from the public has to do with special needs teachers. Do all the schools have special needs teachers? And if so, is there an adequate number of teachers?
No, all schools don't have, and more than likely by now we would realize, no, we don't have sufficient numbers. It is an area in great demand, admittedly. And again, as a result of more and more parents going the route of enrolling their children in school.
Okay, so I'll come to the question of indiscipline. Madam Pierce, you had indicated that you have 106 focus schools, right? That you're dealing with indiscipline. How many of them are primary, and how many secondary?
We have 80 primary schools and 26 secondary schools, and we would have arrived at those numbers in terms of coming out from COVID. We would have realized that some of our schools were at risk, and so we'd have looked at the performance data as well as the disciplinary data for about 3 or 4 years, and we would have identified those 106 schools. And so those schools are of focus, and they have been given dedicated school social workers, guidance personnel also. In addition, in 10 or 11 of those schools, we would have introduced what we refer to as our restorative practice facilitator. So we have dedicated persons who would proactively try to de-escalate issues that are related to discipline. And let me say, on a weekly basis, we are able to collate information on disciplinary issues, infractions, suspensions, in terms of when it occurs, the time it occurs, the type of infraction, and that is also broken down by the individual schools as well as male and female.
That would bring me to the next question, whether you had a breakdown of the disciplinary issues.
Yes, we do. And again, that breakdown is related to our National School Discipline Matrix, which guides suspensions and infractions. So it's captured on a weekly basis.
Can you give us an example of the discipline issues?
So, for instance, if you look at the ratio of males to females, if we have 4 persons being suspended, generally, that would be 1 female, 3 males. That's what they're looking at. In terms of the reasons for infractions, we do have sometimes assault without weapons. We do have issues of vaping within some of our secondary schools. In terms of the actual altercation, sometimes what we do see is some of that occurring after school or during the lunch break, or in some instances, even within the classroom environment. As I said, that is very detailed in terms of when it occurs, the type of infraction, the suspension, as well as the gender breakdown by schools and by district on a weekly basis.
Would you have the information on where these schools are located, the ones that you've identified to focus on?
Can you repeat, please? Sorry.
Can you identify the location of the schools?
Oh, yes. The data is actually at the school level, so it's very minute data. It is also at the school level.
Okay, so you're going to have like a particular district where you might have the more of the disciplinary problems versus.
I probably was kind of lost.
Is the question the location of the schools of focus?
Yes, okay. The location and by district, if a particular district.
Yes, it's broken down like that, yes. We have that information.
Okay. Do we still have guidance counselors assigned to schools? Are all schools
yes
given guidance counselors? Do they work with the teachers as well? Or do they only work with children?
They generally work with the children.
Okay. Because the reason I'm asking is that I'm currently working with young women in music, right? And some of the considerations that so I have to meet with the psychologists to work with them, because these are women coming from traumatic backgrounds. And so I have to adjust my language. I have to also consider the spaces that I choose to work with them musically. So I'm just wondering whether this is a consideration when you have the guidance counselors at the schools, working as well along with teachers as opposed to just the students. Yeah.
Right. But in addition, though, we have the school social workers who would also work with the parents. So especially in those 106 schools of focus, as I indicated, we have dedicated student support services personnel who are placed there, as I said, to de-escalate as much as possible some of the challenges that we see in these schools that we would have identified as high risk at this point in time.
Just one more question to deal with the special needs. Do we consider the temperament of teachers when we think of training teachers to deal with special needs? Because it seems from the discussions, it feels like we are looking at training, or at least informing all students, informing all teachers about special needs students. But I guess this will come down to psychometric testing, right? Is that a consideration at all? For teachers?
There's absolutely no funding for psychometric testing at any level in our work.
Would that be something that would be considered?
Yes, we would like to make.
It would be a priority.
I mentioned that part of the issue of funding is that we can't do psychometric testing, which I agree with you that there has to be a certain sensitivity, a certain empathy, a certain kind of person. And you see it, as Senator Mark referred to in the United States, you have people who are really well trained to handle students with ADHD or who, especially children who are autistic. There is a focused kind of training that recognizes their brilliance and at the same time manages their behavior. I don't think we are there yet. I don't think we are anywhere near there. But we have a lot of examples that we can probably look to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member. So we are coming to a close. Just one more issue I want to raise. Chairman, one of the functions of the TSC is transfers, and you know there's always a concern, whether it's true or not, that that when teachers request transfers, it takes a long time for it to happen. Now I'm seeing here from your submission on page 29, table 8, that 2022, 345 transfers were actioned, in 2023, 346, and in 2024, 310 transfers were completed. And while that might be commendable, my question would be, of that number, how many applications would there have been? And maybe in your answer, you could shed some more light in terms of the main reasons for teachers applying for transfers.
I will allow Chair, Director to handle that question.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair, so these transfers, we work very closely with the Ministry of Education in terms of their submissions. So persons would apply, teachers would apply for transfers from one school to another for a number of reasons. You know, could be they change address, needed to deal with their parent, be closer to home. So a number of reasons we see from the forms that they submit. But we work very closely with the Ministry of Education in terms of ensuring that the transfers are done at the start of the academic year. So hence the reason why you would see that the number of transfers that we would have, the Commission would have approved thus far.
Talk about the policy.
And right, and additionally, thanks DPA. So additionally, the policy, the Commission has since changed its policy. Prior to 2024, what was happening is that an officer who holds an administrative office in the teaching service, for example, a dean or a head of department, a principal, could not apply for a transfer until and unless that office is advertised. The Commission changed its policy, and now you can now apply for a transfer within a term, and the Commission will then interview those persons, and we try to access those interviews are done, you know, sometime in September, in August, so that we can now do the transfers for those teachers by September for the new academic year.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Bastey. But so what I was trying to get at as well is, so is there specific criteria, or do you make allowances? For example, with our current traffic situation and so on, getting to work in the right frame of mind. So, for example, if someone lives, you know, in Moruga and is posted to a school in Diego Martin and they apply for a transfer, how does the Commission treat with that, Chairman?
A vacancy has to be established. You cannot just transfer from one school to another unless there is a vacancy on the other side. And that is the problem. Wouldn't you say that's a problem?
And we also have to balance the person's individual transfer with ensuring that the school is left without somebody. So it's not just transferring, it's ensuring that there's a replacement as well. So there are a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration when it is we looking at a transfer. So it's not just somebody submit an application for a transfer, because we don't want, we transfer the person from South to Diego Martin, and the South school now does not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Got you. We take that for now. A few questions. Yeah, sure.
You could put this in writing, Madam Chair, of the Teacher and Service Commission. If you could get a breakdown in terms of vacancies at the level of primary, secondary schools, and denominationals. Government, denominational. So vacancies, right? Primary, secondary. That's one. Government, denominational boards. So the schools are there under their control, and the schools that the government have under its control. Vacancies. If you don't have it immediately, you can put that in writing. The other thing I wanted to clarify, you mentioned crisis in education. I talk about the World Bank. You have a report, there's a report on that?
Yes, there's a World Bank report. The World Bank issued a report, I think, a month ago, and it was very alarming. And it is describing a crisis of underperformance of education in Trinidad and in the other Caribbean countries.
Is that we can access that?
Yes, you could probably get it online.
Oh, we could get it online. Okay, cool. All right. I just wanted to clarify that. Now, the gender imbalance, the poor terms and conditions of employment, and whilst the Permanent Secretary talked about you have to use contract to top up people's salaries as an incentive, I know that the classification and compensation plan in the public service, as I recall it, is dated 1966. It's an old compensation plan. I may be wrong, but somebody could correct me on that. But in terms of the civil service, as example, I know the teachers and so on did a job evaluation exercise some years ago, I think between 95 and 2000 or thereabouts. But in the case of the civil service, I know they are still operating under old classification and compensation plan. So that is an area, I guess, the union and the CPO will have to address. I would like to find out from Mrs. Charles, in terms of the gender imbalance, could you tell us what exists at the early childhood centers? Is it 82% female and 12%, 18% male?
That was primary.
No, I'm not talking about primary. You have already talked about primary. You have talked about secondary. I'm talking about
ECC.
ECC.
It will probably be more skewed, Senator, on the female side. And we could provide that figure for you, but it will probably be as stark as the 82, 18, if not higher. It might be much higher.
All right. Madam Chair, Teacher and Service Commission, Ms. Schatz, what recommendations are you going to advance for our consideration to address these imbalances? Because we are interested in bringing about correcting this imbalance, as you rightly pointed out. What recommendations? I know the question about incentives was one mentioned, and I think Mrs. Shah talked about contract. You could give people a little more, improve their wages or salaries through a contract arrangement, suppressing posts in the service. But what other recommendations you'd like to advance for this committee's consideration? I'd like to get from both you, Madam Chair, and the PS.
I think an important first step would be for secondary schools certainly to embrace on their career days an inclusion of teaching as a career for the pupils. In the government system, you have boys and girls. And then there are the denominational boys' schools, where on a career day, which most of these schools have, men in teaching go to the schools and speak to the students about it. That's an important first step. There's nothing like being inspired by an educator. Recently, the Ministry of Public Administration, I believe, had a career fair, and our executive director discussed with me the possibility of the Teaching Service Commission mounting an exhibition with flyers and with speakers and so on to promote teaching as a career for young men. And we had no money to do it. So again, the lack of funding for these things hampers and hamstring. It's like you're hamstrung rather to get things done. But I think a first step is that interface between men who are teachers and young boys and young men. That you have no idea of the power of that human interaction. Right. And these persons should show up and speak to their work. Some of them might be a principal. You have, I don't want to call names, but you have an excellent principal who is a man at Queen's Royal College. You have deans who are men. You have heads of department who are men, and they are making careers and they have a livelihood, and they can speak to it. So we should identify these persons and have a campaign to promote it in a very conscious, intentional way. That's a good first step.
Right, okay. And Mrs. Charles, any ideas? Recommendations?
Senator Mark, I am a person who loves the science and data-driven. So the first thing I would want to know is why men are no longer interested in this vocation, because perhaps society thinks of most work as job. Before, teaching was a call. It was a vocation. It was a clarion call for you to imbue in young persons that sense of self and worth and teach people to be more than they can become. I think to a large extent, we have lost that particular passion for teaching, probably most from the male population, because there are other things that are more attractive out there. I think if you look at research, most will tell you that the salary, the remuneration is pivotal and key to persons, especially male, who have to provide for a family. A woman will most likely take a job because she's comfortable, and money may not be the key objective. Maybe not so, but in my day it was. Now, men are just not going into that profession, and I believe CEO was a teacher, just like you, Vice Chair, and perhaps he could draw on why men of his ilk, or younger, sorry, are no longer coming into the service. CEO, you want to give it a go?
Okay, so if I may, Vice Chair, the salary is one of the issues. I think, and again, probably need some more research in this area, but it could be that some men don't see themselves in that nurturing role, so that it's not an option. It's not as if sometimes, and in some cases, they rather perhaps stay unemployed rather than go into teaching. And as Senator Wiedemann could have mentioned, it is a worrying issue, because what it means is that as a male, you enter ECCE and it's a female instructor. Primary school, it's a female instructor. Not that we don't have good instructors that are females. At secondary, female instructor, and I suspect gradually at tertiary also, it will be a female instructor. Yeah. So.
Thank you very much, CEO. No, I think, sorry, Member Mark.
Wanted to ask whether Mrs. Charles, you have the chairman of the Teaching Service Commission. What I wanted to ask is that the 4,000 special needs children. Could we have an idea as to what amount, what quantum, what quantity, what percentage, what number of those 4,000 suffer from learning disabilities? Has that analysis been done? Or is that a work in progress?
Senator Mark, we can't get the breakdown from our Student Support Services Division. So we will supply that answer in writing.
Right. And do you have individual plans for different children, these special needs kids? Do we have individual teaching plans or separate teaching plans at the primary, secondary level, and of course the early childhood level to target these children given the different conditions that they may be experiencing? Do we have that?
In some instances, Senator Mark, we do have IEPs, individualized education plans, for some of these students.
In some instances?
Yes. So I can get the actual numbers for you and supply that in writing.
All right. But I think that as we go forward, I haven't seen the strategic plan for the Ministry of Education, nor have I seen the strategic plan for the Teaching Service Commission. But this is an area, I think my colleague, Dr. Pratasa, raised it, the Vice Chairman raised it. I also addressed that issue, and the public participated in a big way on this issue. So it tells us that it is a real burning issue that parents are concerned about and the citizenry are concerned about. How do we address that? So I'm looking forward to, I haven't seen it, but I probably will get a copy of the Ministry of Education's strategic plan. I'm Vice Chairman. We may get a copy of the Teaching Service strategic plan, and we'll be able to know how they are treating with this issue of special needs children, if at all. And in closing, may I ask the Ministry of Education, do you have a 10-year strategic plan for your Ministry of Education?
We have in our possession the Education Policy Plan 2023 to 2027, which we can make available.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Mark. We want to close up, but before I do that, I believe, is it the Director, Human Resources Secondary, had a hand up wanted to make a
yes.
intervention?
So just to give a point of clarification on the technical vocational teacher salary, TBT4s, their salary is grade 4, starting salary is 12,700, and a TBT2, TBT3, grade 3, their starting salary is 10,500.
Thank you very much. That's based on the
new salary negotiations,
salaries,
yes,
yeah.
correct,
So,
from 2020.
So it was up from 6,000 before, thereabouts. One more question from the public, and then we'll close. And the question is, and I believe this may be, well, either the Teaching Service Commission or the Ministry of Education, are there any reports of public school teachers who refer their students to private lessons that the teacher teaches? I'm thinking that that teacher himself or herself teaches. And if so, what is being done in this situation?
Vice Chair, there are some anecdotal reports, we must admit. But again, if that takes place outside of school hours at the person's residence, then the ministry is limited in terms of what it can do.
Thank you. So as I close, I would just want to invite the three entities to just briefly make a submission. I think it has been a very useful discussion, obviously with a lot of public interest and many issues being ventilated. Just for capture, if I could invite Chairman of the TSC, Mrs. Crow, just a few closing remarks and suggestions. And a final opportunity to make a plug for whatever you think the committee can carry forward on your behalf, on behalf of the Teaching Service Commission.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman. On behalf of my fellow commissioners, Dr. Martha Devines, Mrs. Vidyawati Lala Ramsamy, Mr. Inshan Mohammed, and Ms. Claire Braffett Alexander, who is our commissioner from Tobago, I would like to thank this distinguished committee for the opportunity to be frank and to be indicative in our responses and submissions of real issues and real problems. I think this is the first opportunity we have had for a very long time to sit in this way to share our reality. We feel heartened that we have been heard, and we look forward to some of the recommendations that we have made being taken on board because of the wonderful opportunity you have given to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If I may invite Mr. Corey Harrison.
On behalf of the Service Commissions Department, I would like to say thank you. However, I would like for this committee to be an advocate or an activist in order for us to get additional funding, an advocate or an activist for us to get our structure at the Service Commissions Department. And I thank you. I would leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I know you sit in a very hot seat when it comes to finance, and of course, PS, Ministry of Education.
Thank you
Ms.
very
Giles.
much. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. It was indeed a pleasure, and I continue to look forward to working very closely with the chairperson of the TSC, the Ministry and the TSC. We have been doing some really good work. You have seen that the uptick in terms of having teachers available for placements. We are doing a lot of work in the ministry with the student aids. I know that the public is very interested in that particular aspect, and we will continue to refine and define how we move forward to treat with this issue and agenda in the public domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I would just want to take the opportunity as I close to thank all of the members here who have taken the time and the effort to sit with us for over 3 hours to share your thoughts and ideas with us and to provide the information. PS, your team from the Ministry of Education. Normally we will name each member, but in the interest of time, thank your team on our behalf, and of course the Teaching Service Commission. Thank you for being so, I almost want to say brutally frank in your submission, but I think it's important if we are to move forward. This is the kind of interaction we need. And of course, DP and your team, we recognize the challenges that you face, and we trust and hope that the recommendations of this committee could bring some relief, not only to the work you do, but of course to improving the education standard throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and of course to benefit the students, which is what we are all here for. So I thank you. I also want to thank the members of the media for attending, and of course the members of the public, who have taken the time and the effort, to send their questions and their concerns. I want to thank them for tuning in. At this point, I will just want to say that the officials are excused and this meeting is suspended. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, what a get up.
Yeah, well, they could give us